following each shout-out by the Ennead for Osiris to stand up in the fields of Horus, and the subsequent arousal of Osiris, the sister and consort of this underworld god, Isis, wings her way over to capture the seed of her deceased husband. The Egyptian name for Isis is Ast, meaning literally throne, to connote her identity as the blue-winged throne of her golden-eyed son, Horus. When anthropomorphized, she wears a throne upon her head, but this is not her only crown. She also wears the double-plumed disc of her mate, or more frequently, she cradles a golden disc between a pair of cow horns that sit upon a radial array of disc-bearing cobras that surround her head. She is capable of assuming the form of both a cow and serpent Egyptian iconography. The conventional placement of a radial configuration of golden cobras upon her head, each serpent bearing a golden disc, tempts me to identify this crown as a yellow water lily floral disc, because water lily pistils are typically surrounded by flattened and attenuate, narrowing pollen-bearing structures, the stamens, which exhibit the aspect of a circle of golden hooded cobras. Whether this is the case or not, when Isis assumes her bovine aspect, she usually wears the double-plumed disc, the erect crown, if not a single blue ostrich plume, the symbol of cosmic order, Mat. Here her double-plumed crown complements the horn disc of Osiris, her bullish mate. Isis is a fertility goddess, and thus a giver of life and a purveyor of spiritual sacraments for the dead and the gods. She also stands beside her husband's throne when she renders judgment over the souls of the dead, which the divine couple measure by balancing the weight of Mat's ostrich plume, the symbol of truth, with the past deeds of a deceased person entering into their domain. In fact, the mythic roles of Isis are often conflated with the roles of the goddess Mat, since both goddesses are intimately associated with the blue lotus flower. For example, in some coffin texts, the mother of Horus is said to be Mat, who embraces her son by enfolding him within her wings. But this image is usually the standard image of Isis in Egyptian iconography. Isis is often accompanied by her sister, Nephthys, who is the consort of Osiris's brother, Seth. But Nephthys is pretty much simpatico with her brother, Osiris. Nephthys, whose name means lady of the house or lady of the enclosure, is distinguished by a stylized home or enclosure that sits upon her crown. These close siblings, born, as we may recall, to Geb and Nut, to the earth and sky, share a dual role in guarding the body of their dismembered brother Osiris with their outstretched wings. And they do the same when protecting the son of Isis and Osiris, the young sun god Horus. Both sisters often present the plume of Mat to identify their activities as an integral part of natural order. On the walls of Dendera, for example, they uphold the single plume as they embrace Osiris in his mummy form, and as well his phallic form, the Jed symbol, both with their outstretched wings. With the help of her sister, Nephthys, Isis must seek and find the body of Osiris to collect his dismembered body parts and perform her special goddess magic on his remains. She and her sister accomplished this feat by transforming themselves into either swallows or kites, and then flit about the Nile's shorelines to search for their drowned sibling. A coffin text, number 74, describes the scene as follows. And so you see, Osiris, I have found you, and you lie on your side, great lifeless one. Isis turns to Nephthys to say, this is indeed our brother. So approach and help me raise his head. Let us to reassemble his bones and rearrange his members. There you see the semen that drips from his spirit. Live, Osiris. By this, the lifeless one is implored to stand up and raise himself from upon his side. To awaken, brother, stand up. An earlier pyramid text describes a similar scene. Isis proclaims, and Nephthys says, I have found him. We have found Osiris, laying on his side on the bank. And those who are of the netherworld have come to you, and to those sun folk going to and fro, that you may soon be Horus. These utterances introduce the second crucial stage of the Osirian cycle, which is to find and conserve the dismembered phallus of Osiris-Ra, the important part of the underworld lord that must stand up and awaken to serve the desires of his mate. Her desires being to revive her husband and conceive her husband's avenger, her child to be Horus, the living soul of Osiris-Ra, the soul of the deceased. A well-informed Greek philosopher during Egypt's Greco-Roman period, Plutarch, informs us that the phallus of Osiris is revived by the magical incantations of his mate, without which it would not be able to, well, get it up, stand up. The mythic theme is a popular subject in coffin texts and imagery. Sometimes Isis and Nephthys touch or lift their arms adoringly in praise of the phallic symbol with its lotus bud crown. The same general theme applies to a beautifully executed coffin of Amun from Thebes about 3,000 years ago, which portrays a jed column with the double-plumed disc headdress on the coffin's backside. A frontal view of the coffin, however, portrays a sequence of varying jed forms, phallic forms, which sequentially transform themselves in an upward direction into the heavens, into a full-blown lotus blossom. The son of Isis and Osiris, Horus, depicted here as a falcon-headed scarab beetle with outstretched wings, ultimately raises his floral disc into the sky. So the phallic lord of the underworld has just become a god of the living, a theriomorphic symbol of a lotus flower, the blue falcon. The conception of Horus is the third crucial incident of the Osirian mythic cycle. Isis must receive the seed of her consort to affect her husband's revitalization. At Abydos, where Osiris was worshipped for 3,000 years, a conjugal scene matches closely with descriptions of this important act in the pyramid texts. Isis and Nephthys assume their mythic images as kites here, each extending their wings to guard the mummy of Osiris at his feet and at his head. A third kite is seen alighting upon the phallus of Osiris's cadaver, this representing Isis, who conceives Horus, the falcon god, whose image you can see pays tribute to his father on the far left. Take note as well of the serpents that reside below the mummy and the proverbial mound of Horus that awaits the falcon god's arrival in the upper register of the scene. This general scene is described precisely in pyramid text, utterance 366. Hail, King Osiris! Arise and elevate yourself. The great Ennead guards you and places all of your enemies below you. Your sister Isis arrives and rejoices in love of you. You have placed her on your phallus, and your semen enters her. All of these efforts take place, of course, in the hidden land, the Amentet, which is Osiris's permanent home and aquatic tomb. These themes are captured symbolically on another coffin from Thebes. Here we observe Isis with outstretched wings, holding the feather of Mot upon a pillar motif, which, in tandem, symbolize the mythic image of a blue lotus, a pillared, blue-winged sustainer of a golden disk. Her head supports the phallic being of Osiris-Ra, between which two images of the blue falcon, Horus, bear witness to the rising of a golden disk over the phallic Jed. The two bovine figures observed to the far right and left of the Jed, with double plume crowns, are probably symbolic of Isis, but possibly also perhaps of Osiris, since both of these deities ascend from the lotus grove as a bovid god and goddess in Egyptian mythology. Once Horus has been conceived, the Osirian mythic cycle requires an extended period of caring for the newborn and admittedly weak offspring of Isis. Isis must hide her fragile and vulnerable son in the field of reeds, in the field of Ra, because various adversaries of Osiris, primarily Seth and a host of malevolent serpents, are intent on killing the little boy, since they are aware that he is the natural heir to Osiris's lordship over Amentet. In this role, Isis appreciates once again help from her sister Nephthys, who sometimes serves as a wet nurse to the child. In related myths, the serpents actually succeed in biting the child, but not in killing him on account of the magical healing powers of Horus's mother. This particular tale seems to mirror other hymns that speak of the sun god Ra's similar encounters with venomous serpents. So Isis is both a lifesaver and a life-giver in Egyptian mythology. Yet serpents have very ambiguous roles in Egyptian cosmology, because Horus and some of his close associates, including his mother and aunt, can assume at once the form of a divine serpent while also having to deal with evil serpent demons. Both of these themes are conceivably applicable to a Greco-Roman period mural at Philly, which portrays the falcon god perched in a lotus grove comprised of alternating buds and blossoms, the Egyptian symbol for eternal recurrence. Note how a serpent entwines an erect stalk at one side of the falcon, and a recoiling serpent pulls itself under the water on the other side. In the lower register, the incomplete image of Isis sits her child upon her lap as though she were his throne, Asat, Isis, while she nurses him. A pyramid text speaks, for example, of this scene from the perspective of the divine child. O mother of mine, I beseech you, give me your breast to suck. And Isis responds, my son, take this breast and suck, such that you may live, so that you might ascend to the sky as do falcons. To which Horus responds, yes, as Horus, I will bathe in the field of rushes. I will be clothed in the field of Khepra, and I will find Ra there. Horus eventually matures, of course, into the heir of Osiris's throne, at which stage he begins to prepare for battles with Seth on his father's behalf. The revival of Osiris depends on the success of his son, because the efflux, or tears, from his son's solar eyes will be the magic that returns sight to his father's eyes and virility to his phallus. Thus, Osiris, Isis, and Horus form a divine threesome that immortalize life on the banks of the Nile.